Hi, and welcome to another installment of Math Basics, Mr. Besh. Today we're going to talk a little bit about absolute value. First, what absolute value is. Absolute value is an operation in math, just like you would, calculate something like you're adding or subtracting or multiplying, dividing. To find the absolute value, what you're basically doing is you're determining how far away a value is from zero on the number line, whether you travel to the right or to the left. When you do the absolute value, you want to make sure you got zero. And I always tell students this when they're looking at the number line. Think of zero as the mirror. When you travel to the right on your number line and you count, as you get further and further away on the right-hand side, your numbers get larger and larger and larger. However, when you go to the left, your numbers get smaller, smaller, and smaller. And it's a mirroring image of one another. So when you're asked to calculate the absolute value of, say, 4, what happens is I use this little ruler to show from here to here the distance that I travel is 4. So the absolute value of 4 is going to be 4. The same thing can be said if I asked you for the absolute value of negative 4. Notice the distance between 4 and negative 4 is exactly the same distance apart on my number line. So because of this, they will have the same absolute value. When you take 2 steps, never really discusses whether you take 2 steps forwards or 2 steps back. But if you take 2 steps forward, you said you took 2 steps. Same thing goes when you take 2 steps backwards. You don't take negative 2 steps. You still take 2 steps. So when you're calculating your absolute value, this is the reason why your answers always come out to be a positive. Because what you are doing is you're comparing how far you travel away from zero rather than dealing with the negatives and the positives. A couple more examples here. If I take this little purple one, I go from 0, it takes me to 13 over 5. So the absolute value of 13 over 5 is just that, 13 over 5. But if I go to negative 13 over 5, notice the distance is exactly the same, so the absolute value of negative 13 over 5 would be positive 13 over 5. And last but not least, taking this little guy here, if I go from 0 to 1/2, it's the same distance that I travel from 0 to negative 1/2. Either way, their absolute values are going to be 1/2 apiece. Now the symbol for absolute value is 2 parallel bars on opposite sides of the number, one on the left side and one on the right side. And what this is telling you that you do, okay, is just saying, okay, when you have this in an operation in math, like your orders of operations, you always treat your absolute values like parentheses. You want to simplify these first before you do any other calculations. So now the absolute value of 6 is just going to be positive 6. However, if there was a number inside it that was negative, like negative 3, the absolute value of negative 3 is positive 3. Because remember, all you're doing is calculating how far away from 0 that you are. So now, usually you see a type of example like this where they're asking you to compare the two values. A lot of times, students will just decide and say, oh, the answer has to be right here, this answer has to be 6 because 6 is bigger than negative 7. But in reality, what you need to do first is you need to simplify these values. When you simplify the absolute values of each of these, the absolute value of 6 comes out to be 6, and the absolute value of negative 7 comes out to be positive 7. So now the absolute value of negative 7 is going to be a greater value than the absolute value of 6. Vice versa, you can have little piecemeal fractions, decimals, none of that sort of stuff matters. What you want to do is you want to make them the same common term. What I tell my students all the time is make them into decimals. It's a lot easier to compare our values when they're decimals. So I take 5 divided by 6 to get the 0.83 repeated here, and I do this 0.75, right? Now I'm comparing these two values. Remember, absolutes, they always come out to be the positives. So now when I look at my values, what I have here is that this value is larger than that value. And this is absolute value, ladies and gentlemen. This is what it's all about. I hope you found this video both helpful and informative.